Our final session of the blockchain basics track, but please join me in welcoming to the stage our moderator, Brian Baglow.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. One persistent theme of my career has been to be the last speaker or moderator before you lot and alcohol. So thank you, Chris, for scheduling me before everyone gets to go for a beer. It has been a fascinating afternoon. I'm sure you will all agree. So first of all, I would like to thank you for staying. It is going to be an interesting session. So far today, we have looked at the embryonic nature of blockchain and NFTs, its value to games, an introduction to the whole concept. But now we're going to be diving headlong into the future. Where are we going to be? How is this going to look when you're here at PGC Connects London 2027? So I'd like to invite my panel to join me on the stage, please. So I will ask you to introduce yourselves to the lovely ladies and gentlemen, and give them just a very brief bio, who you are and what it is you do. So Bozena, first of all, please, if you would.
Yes, happy to do it. So my name is Bozena. I'm Czech. I'm CEO and co-founder of mobile gaming company that's called GAMEE. We have been in mobile gaming, casual gaming industry for 8 years now. When I counted, it sounded a lot, but I've heard higher numbers here, so. And we have built a community of global excited players that play on mobile phone casual games. We have released hundreds of them, and we have 40 million registered players. 2 years ago, we started looking into how do we take this platform to a next level, and fell in love with blockchain, and started working on implementing some of the ideas and concepts into new products. And here we are today with one of the biggest dApps on Polygon that's on mobile, in mobile space, casual gaming, first game characters, NFTs out in the hands of players. And the rest, I guess we will talk about later.
Perfect, thank you. And Markus?
Yeah, hello, my name is Markus Lipp. I'm the CEO of Kongregate. You probably know Kongregate. We started 2006 with free-to-play, inventing a big platform where more than 40,000 developers and more than 140,000 games were published. We went into publishing, then into first-party mobile game development, own game development, and ended up actually also in blockchain. 2019, we engaged with a company called Forte, San Francisco-based blockchain company that you might have heard of, where we tested the acceptance of blockchain in our platform community, integrated a first game, Survive.io, which is a 2D battle royale game, where we created a lot of wallets, minted over 500,000 NFTs, but not openly tradable. So that was a bit the, let's say, downside for us. You have probably seen today we released a press announcement that we partnered with Immutable on actually going a bit down that road and testing some NFT games on the side. We signed up for 2 projects coming out, and we are all up to it.
Fantastic, thank you. And then Alexander, I know you introduced yourself to the lovely audience earlier, but
I'm the previous guy. So, so I'm a geek by training. Did sort of robotics at Edinburgh, AI at MIT, sort of serial entrepreneur. I've sort of sold companies, run companies to the ground pretty hard. 3 IPOs, 1 in London, 2 in NASDAQ. And we do enterprise software for the gaming industry. So we build technology that our customers are using to make more money of their users and accelerate their Web3 strategy.
Oh, this isn't working? Well, I was just handing the microphone on.
Which one?
Yeah.
This one? Okay.
The stick mic.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, thank you all, and I think you'll agree we've got an absolutely unparalleled panel of people who have already started to explore the reality of blockchain. So, it's Pocket Gamer Connect 2027. London has not flooded, so therefore we can assume the environmental catastrophe that blockchain poses to the world has not come true. We're 5 years down the line. What does this industry look like? Mobile and the wider game sector. Is blockchain everywhere? Where do you see this whole new world taking us? And we'll start with you, Bozena.
Yeah, I think the beauty of that is that we don't know.
Okay,
and
so
any imaginations, of course, is guessing. And I think with every every major technology shift, people always imagine where it's going to take us, and then it takes us completely different place. Like you gave the example with with Second Life and mobile. I think that what we're seeing now is a lot of discussion how the technology is going to change the games we know. But what I think is actually going to happen is we will see games we don't know. We will see new genres, new economies popping up that are yet hard to imagine. So they will be completely new. It's exciting time for gamers because they will get to play games that did not get their hands on before. And we will also see blending of gaming, finance, education, actually more industries coming closer together because of the nature of blockchain, how it enables decentralized finance, how it brings financial concepts into game, how we mix GameFi and DeFi and everything together. So we will even have new industries, intersections that we did not have before. We may even have new jobs, and we're already seeing that in games. We have seen that with esports, right? We're now seeing that with gaming guilds that are organized around play and earn games. There will be even new types of jobs and companies. I've recently had a conversation with a company I could not imagine a year ago. There will be a company like that. These are people who are working on, they focus on breeding game characters within play and earn games. This is their business. And my first response was like, what? And then was, wow, because then you start imagine how, I'm sorry, I will give you space, but you start imagining how when you give people ownership, and the ownership comes with some economic concepts, and it's still within games, but they start thinking like entrepreneurs, what I can do with that. And again, these are the things we cannot imagine, and it will be many wows, like I had with this Breeder DAO company, which I did not imagine would be there.
Fantastic, thank you. And Markus?
Yeah, I just can agree to what Bozena said. At the end, 5 years down the road, we will certainly see, oh, that pay to win fear was probably a bit over spiked, you know, and it was something similar that we experienced with free to play back in the days, right? So we are still here, and the market has found its space, and I'm pretty confident that this will happen again. The tech will get easier. It's still too complicated for the grandma in Nebraska to, you know, open a wallet and combine it with OpenSea and do some stuff with it. That will certainly get easier. And we will see more play to earn opportunities. Users will accept that as actually the next level of development in gaming at all. That's my view.
Fantastic, and we're going to come back to the creator economy later. And Alexander, I mean, you covered smart contracts. How do you see this 5 years down the line future?
Well, I was never that smart, right? I always go maybe 36 months tops, but
I know it is an unfair question.
So I mean, on the climate thing, because that's important, I think that's a solved problem. Right? I mean, that's going to go away over the next sort of 12 months. I mean, you need sort of proof of stake, and that's that. I think there's going to be a more interesting blend of, let's say, gaming and social interaction in games or virtual worlds. There sort of a lot of folks are sort of working on that. I think technology on the VR side is going to become more interesting and more accessible, and that's certainly going to be helpful. And I go back to the original point, actually, what you just made on the breeding thing, right? I think you're going to see companies and sort of entrepreneurs build functionality that seems, let's say, based on building blocks that exist. So for instance, you know, we're talking to a bunch of sort of fashion brands that are really building technology for utility NFTs that are going to be wearing within sort of games with smart contracts with functionality, right? You're wearing that sort of shoe, and that shoe is going to help you walk 5% faster within that game because it's a branded shoe. And a global, you know, shoe company would pay, you know, decent amounts of money to a gaming company for that functionality to exist, for that contract to get executed. So I think you're going to be seeing sort of very, very interesting entrepreneurship sort of opportunities on the single entrepreneur sort of, even for single entrepreneurs, because they're going to be building on top of all of these sort of blocks. That wasn't really English, but I have a funny accent, so.
No, this is good.
Let me please
Markus.
add one thing,
Yeah, of
because you
course.
mentioned smart contracts. I really think that in 5 years, even if you look a bit outside of gaming, you know, smart contracts will basically solve most of the contracts in our daily life. If you just think of concert tickets, event tickets, smart contracts solve all these issues of reselling a ticket, for example, the real estate market. I think there's a lot of potential in just thinking about what smart contracts can do. And especially in gaming, royalties or getting the buy-in from developers, joining certain projects, assuring there is an automated share implemented for secondary market sales. It's pretty easy. You don't need accounting. You know, I'm also a finance guy, but you don't need accounting for that any longer.
Or
Smart,
legal.
yeah, the smart contract is kind of taking care of it. And this is a huge opportunity.
Now, you see, I find that absolutely fascinating. And this is one of the questions where I think it was started to be addressed in some of the earlier sessions, but I really want you guys to, again, project into the future. So where does blockchain live in this brave new world? Is it something that developers can implement in games? Is it something for publishers? Is it financial providers and payment providers who are owning this? Or is it ubiquitous across the whole value chain?
I mean, I think it's everything, right? I think one of the interesting sort of elements of this community is that it's very sort of open in terms of collaboration, and sort of distributed ledger technologies allow for, by definition, for integration, because you're talking about public ledgers, right? On top of which you have sort of full transparency into the market, on top of which somebody can build. So you're looking at sort of securitization of physical assets. You're looking at tokenization of physical assets in terms of the smart contracts, and you're also looking for, let's say, clarity of contractual obligations. I mean, in my mind, for instance, 5 years from now, the typical marketing organization, certainly of a publisher, but also of a, let's say, global brand, they're going to look completely different, right? Because there's not going to be any questions about attribution anymore. In the same, remember Amazon, when Amazon introduced their sort of extremely easy affiliate network, where any second-rate blogger would write a review, add a link, and then suddenly money would appear in their accounts because there was a link into Amazon. We're going to be seeing the same thing with smart wallets, right? So you add your wallet address and you're a creator, you will be compensated. You introduce somebody to a brand in your metaverse character, you will be compensated. So in my mind, marketing would completely sort of change in 5 years. And some people sort of realize that, some not. And I'm not just talking about our world, which is, let's call it virtual and self-contained. I'm talking about real world marketing as well.
That's fascinating. Bozena.
Yes, many thoughts. One of them that is from future, but I think may from present, but may translate to future, is that we have been operating in mobile gaming space for quite some time. And the moment when we launched our gaming token and first games that are powered by the token with NFTs, overnight, we changed into a public company with this. How different the community thinks and behaves, it took me by surprise, really. And we had to play kind of a catch up with the mindset of the company to really feel how different this is and how differently the company has to be managed. Also in terms of product development, iterations. I don't know how about you, but we used to like launch a game to a small sample of gamers, right? See the data, iterate, change, iterate, change, iterate all the time. It's not that easy anymore because once you take people on board and they hold your token, they hold your game characters, they feel part of the founding team, they feel part of the company, they're stakeholders, they care, they know every single detail. And it's a very different process to come and explain that you're going to make a change and why. So it's a different communication style with the community, but also different mindset how the product is built with this in mind.
Now, that's interesting because for a lot of developers, their focus, their holy grail is to make a good game. You know, they want to make something that obviously players will like, but they can be proud of. But there's a certain mindset in the development community, which is our job is to make the thing. And so I guess my question is, how how much is that going to have to change if you are not only making the thing, but that thing comes with an intrinsic value that then exists in perpetuity? You know, is every game creator going to have to become more of a financial institution or a more
I
responsible?
don't think it's about being financial institution. I think the bottom line is transparency. Is that you really have to be very transparent that you're changing something or going to do something and why and how exactly. So of course the devil's in the detail, of course, but this is the transparency is the key, and it's in everything. I see it in everything, and it's already happening. And speaking about future, I don't think this is going to go away that easily.
Okay, interesting. Gentlemen, either of you have?
One thing to add, probably, I fully agree with both comments. The future will be chain agnostic, which means it doesn't matter if you come from an Ethereum-based layer 1, layer 2 sidechain or any kind of Solana solution at all. You know, I think it's really wallets will get easier. It will be much easier for developers to connect with their user base through. It's not about exclusivity in this case, right? It's not about making certain solutions. You will always be able to adopt. This is how I at least see the end game for this.
Now that's interesting, because you've totally ruined one of my later questions, so thank you. But I think that interoperability and that transparency in both senses of the word is really important. So the underlying technology becomes more or less irrelevant, you know, same as if you're on 3G, 4G, 5G. There's no fundamental difference in the capability, as it were, but it's how that's going to be leveraged by the company. Is that where you all see this?
Well, I think the problem with technology is that technology needs to be very complex in order to be seamless. So it's going to take us a while to get there in terms of the interoperability, but it's certainly, in my mind, it's a one-way street. The other thing that's interesting that sort of touches back on the previous one, I love this concept of opening up and providing tools to, let's say, the community out there. We can call them sort of creators, we can call them participants, because I mean, people feel they have skin in the game once they buy an NFT versus in a purchase. I mean, it's mind-blowing how their thinking changes. So creating the right tools to open up sort of the games and essentially push intelligence to the edges instead of trying to centrally sort of design everything, allow people to sort of experiment. I think that's going to act as sort of an incremental accelerator in that evolution.
Now that's interesting, because again, we touched on the creator economy earlier, and the whole notion that as you just said, players feel a far greater sense of possession and, you know, to be as part of the ecosystem. So in this, again, brave new world, if we had an issue where a game creator, publisher, puts something out that the player base doesn't necessarily like, do you think we're going to see an awful lot of pushback? You know, I'm thinking of issues like, you know, the Mass Effect 3 ending, Left 4 Dead 2 announcement, all of the areas where the players suddenly showed that they weren't a passive audience, but an active participant in the ongoing evolution of the game. Do you think blockchain and our sort of new world is going to enable more of this, especially with smart contracts?
I mean, it's for sure, right? I mean, if you look at sort of, it's going to be, it's more evolutionary, right? I think, yes, people will be coming with sort of pitchforks and sort of fires to make sure that they feel a sense of ownership.
Okay,
And
more
if you
death threats.
if you look at sort of DAOs and sort of voting, it's sort of, and the smart contracts that are sort of associated with that in more open games, it's really, I mean, in my mind, this is really sort of bacooning from 100-something years ago, right? This is, it's a structure way of doing, it's really anarchy, right? Sort of for the people, by the people. It's a democracy, it's not a republic. I mean, that's the best way to explain it. One person, one vote.
Okay.
Maybe to add on that, I think it's always a process, right? I mentioned it earlier, we saw it with free-to-play. We saw it with social media. We saw it actually also with the internet. People, there are always doubters and there are always embracers. We are still early stage, which means this whole thing is kind of still developing. And
of course,
it's on the ones who issue NFTs to make it something important and not to have financial short-term interest. This is there. This has also been with the internet and with everything. And bubble bursted, but we are still using it, right? So this is what I assume for NFTs as well. Sure, there are a couple of projects out that are highly overvalued, but let the market decide what's good and what's bad. I think this will always come together.
That's it. Yeah, no, I see exactly where you're coming from. And again, I know much of this is not groundless speculation, as you're all experts coming with your own qualifications from now, but do you see blockchain as kind of, again, being ubiquitous? Is this for every game, every experience? Is it going to drive the converged future? Or is it going to be a special use case that we reserve for, specific types of experience?
Maybe to quickly jump in there as well, sorry. I think if we look, as of today, it might be something where people, kind of look very carefully into the implementation. They are kind of anxious around losing the user base whatsoever. If we stay to your 5 years from now example, I think, yes, the opportunities, also IP brands will much deeper move into that direction. And technically, you can always create an experience around it. If you just put the short-term greed and financial interest aside, there's enough space for everything. And the really interesting part is, if you just look at marketing, for example, traditional UA doesn't really work these days with blockchain NFT strategies. So everything is taking place in communities, Discord, Reddit, Twitter, you name it. And this is kind of even getting new opportunities on the side. So I think you will have a much closer contact to your user base than you potentially have as of now, as you can give them certain rights, governance rights, to kind of, but at least kind of vote what kind of game is coming next, what kind of element feature is coming next. Something like that. It gives users extreme opportunities. It still has to find its way, but as I said, we are early stage.
Interesting. Bozena, do you have anything else you would like to?
Yeah. So for the question was whether you would use blockchain for any type of game, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that in this case, it's first, blockchain is a tech and a mindset, like two separate things. And for the tech itself to use it in a game, it has to have a good reason. Because if you're speaking about 2022, it's still quite hard to onboard, like all the gas fees and the connects and the verifications, and it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And so now it has to have a good reason to put blockchain into an existing game, because there is a risk of misunderstanding. So why is this here? How does that benefit the game? And we had a choice of implementing the blockchain concepts into our existing platform that has 3 million monthly active users, and we decided not to do it because of the second reason, the mindset. Because the platform was built with a different mindset, with different ideas, different concepts. It has an audience that we did not walk through the baby steps with, and we decided to start over and start with a second generation of the platform from zero. It's not zero, it already has 500,000 monthly active users on blockchain, but it was built with blockchain in mindset, meaning it was not decentralized from day one, of course, that I would personally find crazy. I don't know how to do that, but it's step by step. It's like launching a platform that has on-chain gaming currency. You don't have to have a wallet, but you can, and then adding NFTs, and then adding decentralization and voting, but you don't have to. And it's like we're learning as a company to get together with our audience what is the right way, what works, what doesn't. But it's with a different mindset, using the tech in that game. It's a new game, it's a new genre, if you want. And I did not see how I can take the new mindset and paste it into an existing game and community without giving them a shockwave.
That's interesting, because one of my questions was going to be, are we going to be able to bolt blockchain on? Are you going to see big companies trying to leverage existing IP and franchises and just basically smashing blockchain into it?
I think we're seeing it, no?
We are, yeah, to greater and lesser degrees of utter failure and ignominy. But does it require, being built in, designed in from the outset, or is this something that we can see the existing services we know and love today evolving gradually?
Well, I think there's a lot of movement that's sort of valuation driven, right? You have sort of traditional publishers that are looking at crypto first publishers achieving crazy, crazy, crazy valuations out there in the market. And they're trying to put things out there as quickly as possible. The fastest thing to do that, sort of retrofit an existing game with NFTs. Is going to be sort of optimal? Probably not. So, I mean, probably 10 years ago, if you recall, HBO was trying very hard to become Netflix, and Netflix was trying very hard to become HBO.
Yeah.
So Netflix was trying to start producing content, and HBO was trying to start sort of streaming. And I'm not sure how many of you guys remember how Netflix started, right? They were email you DVDs, right? You could have 5 DVDs at any given sort of time, and then you would mail it back. You get sort of the next one. So I think we're seeing something similar right now between the crypto first publishers that a lot of times are, let's say, they look like NFTs in search for any sort of gamification or sort of deep engagement. And then you have traditional publishers that, you know, they know, I mean, this is their bread and butter, but they're very, very eager to put something out there that's crypto because that's what their investors are asking them to do. So the question is, I mean, that's why I think we're going to be seeing a lot of the crypto first guys acquiring studios, as in, I mean, and you have already seen even technology companies in the crypto space start acquiring sort of studios. There's going to be sort of a lot of more of that. And then we're already seeing a lot of traditional folks, publishers sort of fundraise very quickly, trying to introduce with the sole purpose to introduce sort of crypto first games. So it's going to be interesting how these sort of two completely different worlds in terms of mindset start sort of meshing.
Now, again, to pick up on that point, so the first generation of web services essentially took the real world, you know, like hotel booking, hotels.com, you just did exactly the same thing, but online. And it took an entire generation till we got to Airbnb and Uber and kind of generation 2, where it reimagined transport, I need to be here, rather than let's build a big building and fill it with bedrooms. So are we looking at the same kind of situation? Are we going to see an entirely new generation growing out of this? Or are we going to see sort of the existing players continuing, but just including more and more crypto?
I mean, I have a 30-second answer, which is I think most of the value in general, as technology evolves, is being at the top of the chain, right? So the basic, in the same way that sort of carriers used to own the world and they don't anymore, in the same way that we're going to be seeing that sort of the core infrastructure is not where money is being made, but money is being made at the sort of at the top layer of innovation. So in my mind, it's going to be, yes, there's going to be the typical user / participant is going to be a much more active member of those communities, and sort of a good chunk potentially of their income is going to be coming out of that, right? Out of their passion. Because right now, if you think about it, for a typical user, it's all downside. I mean, granted, you cannot spend, I mean, there's not a lot of place in the, let's call it, in an OECD country where you spend, let's say, $5 and you can entertain yourself for an hour. It's pretty cheap. But still, users only spend money.
Of course.
So fast forward sort of 5 to 10 years, I think their online activities or their gaming activities are going to be sort of producing income as well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Again, it brings us back to the creator economy. And I have a follow-up question about the IP and where that lives. But Markus, Bozena, do you have anything to add into the notion of?
Well, just probably to your question around the booking and the Airbnb. I personally think in a couple of years from now, you could technically do that in the metaverse, right? Just think about the classes, VR, AR, getting 1-2 generations further. That might be a very easy thing. Probably board meetings or meetings that you might not be able to do physically. They will still not take place physically, but in a metaverse kind of structure, which we might totally get used to. I mean, everything is so digitalized. If you just look at, you know, people being concerned about their blue check marks, about their followers on Twitter and whatsoever, we are already living somehow in the metaverse, even if we look at our kids. So this step is not so far away. It's a logical consequence of what we are already in.
That's a really great point. I'm going to pick you up on that in a second. Bozena, do you have anything?
Yes, so the old players versus new players, right? I think it does not, like, of course the best teams win. It even matter whether they're from big company or a new company. What I think matters is the conversation about open versus closed. So regardless if that is a big company or a small company, if we can build this new digital reality that has some open principles, that's fine.
Now that's fantastic, because it brings me right to the point I was going to ask, which is, and again, I know these are unfair questions. This is total speculation, but are the current tech giants going to dominate in this world 5 years down the line, or is it going to be a disruptive newcomer, a fast mover who comes in and kind of makes this happen?
I mean, there's always somebody new every 5 to 10 years, right?
Yeah.
That becomes one of the big guys. Remember, I mean, who were the big, well, back in my day, the typical VC would ask you, hey, what would happen if Microsoft decides to do that? And at that point, Microsoft was sort of Gates and Steve Ballmer, right? And that sort of changed sort of over time. So I think they're absolutely going to be sort of upstarts that are sort of going after things. And no matter how smart somebody is, they're always going to meet something. I mean, look at Facebook, right? When Facebook announced the Instagram acquisition, everybody was shocked. It's like, what? This guy is about to IPO, is going to pay a freaking billion without consulting his board because he has voting rights? So what the fuck? I mean, nobody, no. Sorry about that, guys.
It's the last session.
Let's beep that, yes.
Go ahead.
So people were shocked, right? But he did the right thing. Why? Because he was looking at the numbers, right? And then it was WhatsApp a few years sort of later for whatever it was, sort of 17 freaking billion. But he missed TikTok, right? He missed video. And for the first freaking time, you're looking at sort of Facebook's numbers, Meta's numbers sort of going down. So nobody's that smart in the long run. So there's always going to be somebody that's smarter than you in the long run. So I mean, in my mind, yes, they're absolutely going to be sort of new major. It's not like the old guys are going away, right? But because you're looking at sort of network effects, there's going to be certainly sort of a handful of new folks that will become sort of giga companies.
I fully agree with that. I mean, just take the top 5 NFT game projects. There's so much space around doing more in the metaverse, like Upland, Decentraland, breeder combinations with tokens like actually Infinity did, or if you just take Upland, for example. I think there's a lot of space. There will still be the IP game out there and the brand game, and that will dominate its genre like it always did, but there will be others on the side entering new opportunities around these fantastic new mechanics.
Yeah. And I think this is, I guess, one of the points is we're here at, Pocket Gamer. We all come mostly from a video games background. Are games going to be the killer use for this new blockchain world? Is it going to be games that are pushing this forward rather than other types of content?
Yes.
Perfect. I like your style. Good. Moving on. No, sorry, Jeff. You see, you guys could learn a lot. No, sorry. Do you guys agree? Do you think gaming is where we're going to see this evolution? The key uses for ownership?
Well, I think users are going to be spending more and more time where their friends are, and this is sort of online in some sort of gamey / virtual world environment. And I think that the way we think of games right now would certainly sort of evolve.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's a solid yes, but what the typical publisher publishes is going to be slightly different than what they publish today.
No, that's a very, very fair point. Markus?
No, just to add, the content part is very important. I think you can really become an architect of the future, what you might be able to contribute within the game by earning certain tokens that allow you to participate, or by simply stake some of your interest into the game that allows you to be part of something bigger. This is actually the very good and solid story around blockchain. We are able to create the adventure again around the user and not so much around what the company might think is good.
That's great. And I'm going to pick up on this as one of our last topics before we open it up to the audience, because you guys have been sitting there passively consuming, and it's about time you worked for the beer you so richly deserve. So start thinking. If we don't get any good questions, the doors stay locked. Okay? We have to sit in awkward silence until 7 o'clock. That's what's going to happen. So we've talked about the creator economy. We've talked about play to earn, pay to earn, play to earn. I beg your pardon. And I kind of want to drill down into that a little bit, is because not every player is necessarily going to want to be a creator. But something that you picked up on, Alexander, was people's attention. You know, if on Facebook, on Instagram, on more social channels, your participation, your likes, your data, if you will, has value. Are we going to see this being used more in games rather than, you know, I'm going to create items? Are we going to see people participate, rewarded for their participation?
I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the UA approach is kind of moving away from traditional UA, user acquisition, more into that social media related user acquisition. And I think this is an interesting scope as we are kind of overcoming all IDFA concerns and whatsoever. And thinking a bit through that development is very interesting. Not sure yet where it takes us, but I think it's a different angle from where you are able to reach the user and interact with the user. And again, balancing within a game is very important. You don't want to break things, so nobody should be forced to engage with NFTs. It should be possible to play a game also if you kind of want to do it with a traditional angle and not want to become a user around that. I think staking and earning is rewarding. You could also think about collecting, simply kind of taking some trophies. You know, we have different genres of gamers. I think this is at the end still powerful because the user or the market makes the decision around that.
That's a very interesting.
Looking in the play and earn economies, I think we go beyond the rewarding creators for creating. I think we're already looking into how can you reward and recognize time, effort, loyalty, skill, everything the player invests in the game, how that can be rewarded. It typically distributes the value in the game as we see now, and the future we don't know, remember. We see the value distributed in a little bit different way. So rather than between the developer and percentage of players that pay, we see the value distributed more among the players themselves. So they earn something in the game, so they can offer to somebody else who does not want to invest that much time or does not have the skill or effort, you name it. So it's a little bit of a different distribution of value and game mechanic. It cannot be applied, of course, to a game that did not have that in design, but it's rather than looking at what is the lifetime value of a user as we are using in traditional user acquisition, what is the value that the game can offer to the user, and instead, for example, that's one example, instead of paying that to an ad network, you're seeing that value being offered to players for creating that value and bringing more players, for example. That's one of the different takes on how this can be done.
That's a fantastic point, and something that I think every developer can take something away from. Gentlemen, do you have anything to add before we open it up for the floor? Okay. I have one final question, but I'm relying on you people, glaring at you now. Does anyone have any questions for our incredible panel? No pressure. Yes, sir.
I have a kind of broad question on security. So a lot of there seems to be a disconnect between blockchain tech and security. So, for example, I think one of the speakers mentioned the move to proof of stake to solve the issues. But, for example, Bitcoin won't touch proof of stake because it's kind of untested and there's issues. So, I guess my question is, how decentralized and how secure does blockchain gaming need to be? Is it a spectrum? Like, for example, do people need to validate they own their NFTs, or should they trust the gaming company? Like, yeah, just interesting thoughts on that in general.
Ooh, down into the guts. Okay. Would anyone like to pick that up?
Maybe let me start. It's actually a great question. I think security in general, let me start there. You have issues in everyday's life, right? So I think blockchain is not the healing outcome for this, for sure not. But you can do a lot to make it safer or to improve it. I think especially around proof of stake, I would say the decentralized approach is very strong and kind of moving it away from anything that needs centralized approval or clearing. So you need to trust this at the end, right? And you need to incentivize the stakers in the right form or the validators to assure that they have the best interest in validating according to their underlying principles. This is with everything. I think fraud, you will never be able to capture fraud completely on the side. With everything you do, you just will be able to implement security measures to cover it early, to detect it early. How safe are wallets? What is the education around using wallets and the usage in general, where gaming companies can help, especially when you think of my grandma in Nebraska example, who might not be able to really connect anything to an OpenSea wallet these days. So we might need to take a lot of educational approaches to bring the user exactly to the kind of usage that we want to see.
Fantastic answer. Anyone else?
I think it's solved right in the next sort of 12, 24 months. There's so much money being sort of put into this whole ecosystem. If we're not worried about fraud online, where everybody and their mother passes around sort of credit cards, the core technology behind distributed ledger are sort of pretty robust. All of the major chains are sort of pretty much there. Most of the, sorry? Over how many trillions of value? There's a nominator and there's a denominator. So if you look at sort of, I think there's a lot of the issues, not all of the core technology, but around sort of, phishing, where you're sort of storing your keys and things like that. So it's sort of on the ancillary, it's on the human interface, let's say, like where typically fraud exists, right? And goes without saying. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And there are always going to be sort of micro issues around the early adopters. But the point is, by the point you have scale, these are solved by definition, right? In any sort of technology, right? So.
Quote of the session. Thank you. Do we have any more questions? I think we have time for a couple. The gentleman up the back here, please.
So we're seeing this blueprint almost among all the blockchain-based gaming companies, where they follow the same pattern. Like they're gonna raise their funds, they're gonna do their drop, they're gonna launch the NFT marketplace, and then there's the game, or maybe there isn't. We don't know yet. With so many of them, they're still not quite in that stage. But do you see this being the blueprint that every single NFT, every single game, whether that's crypto, NFT, or both, they would require to have that highly integrated NFT marketplace that is very close to the ecosystem? Because Coinbase is just about to launch their solution, and they could become #1 overnight, almost. And I wonder whether that's a necessity, whether that's how it's going to continue, or it's likely to be a temporary thing.
Interesting. Would anyone like to pick that up, Markus?
Yeah, let me take this, please. I think a company who launches a game on a blockchain or issuing an NFT should always think about, is this primarily to raise funding, gain short-term financial interest with it, or are you really in for the long run? Because then you might have a complete different angle on where to start, right? And we are, of course, always more interested in the content-related part, where you have a concept in place, that you do this together with a partner. The short-term NFT drops are certainly very interesting to gain interest and to even help building those communities that I earlier mentioned. So, but with everything new, there's always short-term financial interest. It was with the internet bubble, it was with the NFT in general. Should you buy a llama for $18,000 with a taco in its mouth? Probably not, right? So I mean, it's always a bit of a question where you end up as a user as well, and how recipient you are for these kind of things, or if you have a long-term ambition to really use NFTs in a gaming landscape, trust the company, they have a solid white paper out where you can kind of study the project. This is always the approach I would always prefer.
That's fantastic. A great answer. Thank you.
I also think the communities, they're going to define what is enough and what is good enough. And like you named that, like the project is doing a couple things and it almost sounds like it's not enough, right? They announce white paper, NFT drop, maybe a trailer. So I think it does not work the same way as it worked, for example, last year when there was a massive hype, and we're already seeing changes in how the community gets more sophisticated, how they require more, like how what was enough is not enough anymore. So I think we'll just grow out of the not enough into something substantial.
Fantastic. Alexander, anything to add?
We work for the same company, so I'm conflicted.
Plant, always a good way to end.
Last question.
Does anyone have anything? Oh, God. Okay.
I'm interested in your 5-year fix. I've got 2 questions about that. One is, what percentage of the current blockchain games companies and startups that are here now will be here in this 5 years in the future when the tides rise, or otherwise, do we think? What's the survival rate, do you think, from here?
So, I mean, if you look at the market right now, or let's say 2021 data, the total NFT trading volume was $23 billion. 20% out of that was gaming. And I think 50% out of that was just kind of the top 5 games I earlier mentioned, right? So this ratio will certainly increase. And the question will be how many new projects, new metaverse related projects might appear and open up new doors for gaming companies to step in. I assume the trading volume itself will somehow move away from purely the collectible side, as this is certainly a bubble with my llama example earlier. But gaming and creating usage around what the user can contribute, this will kind of replace a lot, and market share will move rather into that. So I would say 5 years from now, we are rather seeing potentially a 50% plus market share around.
So that completely answers how we're still survive, but yeah. And the final thing I was going to say, and I don't mean, I'm generally quite positive and enthusiastic about the opportunity, so I'm being a bit devil's advocate. But one issue that people raise in the games industry that are concerned about this is the change of playing games because you like playing games and ascension to doing it for a primarily financial motivation. Do you think there's any danger in that? Nothing wrong with earning money, right? Everybody likes that, but is there a finer line then between games and gaming or gambling then when we're on that space?
Universal sort of basic income, right?
What, games? I don't know. I'm just thinking.
If you're earning, if you're doing what you want to do, I mean, if you think about gaming, right, what do you pay? It's sort of micro addictions. So if you're doing what you want to do and you make some money either on the side or a good chunk of money sort of doing that, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing.
I think it's bad. I'm just asking if you think there's challenges there, I guess.
Okay, I'm going to shut you down now. Does anyone else have anything to add? No? Okay. In that case, it was. Let's end with the boss asking a good question. Right, ladies and gentlemen, before you all leave, I would like you to put your hands together and thank the panel. Bozena, Markus, Alexander. It's never nice to be asked to speculate in a market that you're an expert in, especially one that evolves so quickly, especially not when it's being filmed and will live forever on the internet. But it won't come back and bite you, I'm absolutely convinced. But thank you so much for being brave enough to take part this afternoon. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. It brings us to the end. Thank you very much. I will close now and enjoy the rest of your day.